They laughed when the lawyer read her inheritance. A rotting cottage while they claimed the mansion, the empire, the fortune. But beneath those warped floorboards lay Adrian's final secret. A vault of gold bonds and documents that would destroy them all. Selena Ward had been called the Cottage Girl for the last time. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Before we begin, please click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. The law offices of Cole and Associates smelled like old leather and older money. The kind of scent that clung to wood panel walls and reminded you exactly where you stood in the world hierarchy. Selena Ward sat in the corner chair, her 4-year-old daughter Lila pressed against her side, and tried to make herself invisible. It was a skill she perfected over the 3 years she'd been married to Adrian Sterling. The art of disappearing in plain sight while his family occupied every inch of space with their presence. Evelyn Sterling sat at the head of the conference table, like a queen holding court, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her Chanel suit precisely tailored to her still slender frame. At 63, she possessed a kind of cold beauty that made people step back rather than lean in. Her hands, heavy with rings that cost more than most people's cars, rested on the polished mahogany surface with studied calm. To her right sat Miranda Sterling Vaughn, Adrian's older sister, 38 and perpetually bitter about it. She wore designer everything. The dress, the shoes, the calculated expression of bored superiority. Her phone sat face up on the table, probably ready to lip-tweet the reading of her dead brothers, will to her 70,000 Instagram followers. Miranda had built a career as a lifestyle influencer, which as far as Selena could tell meant posting pictures of expensive things she hadn't paid for while offering advice nobody asked for. Damian Sterling, Adrian's younger brother at 29, sprawled in his chair with particular arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. He'd worn a suit to the reading, but he'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar, as if he couldn't be bothered with the formality of his own brother's will. His eyes kept drifting to his Rolex, checking the time like he had somewhere more important to be. Richard Cole, the family attorney, sat at the opposite end of the table, a manila folder thick with documents positioned precisely in front of him. He was 50-something, gray at the temples, and had the weary expression of a man who'd spent 30 years watching wealthy families tear each other apart over money. He cleared his throat, and the sound cut through the air-conditioned silence like a knife. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began, his voice professionally neutral. "I know this is a difficult time." "Let's just get on with it, Richard," Evelyn interrupted, her tone arctic. "Adrian's been dead for 3 weeks. I think we've adequately observed the mourning period." Selena's fingers tightened on Lila's small hand. 3 weeks since Adrian's heart had simply stopped in the middle of the night, the same hereditary condition that had killed his father at 42, taking him at 35. 3 weeks since she'd woken up next to her husband's cooling body and screamed until the neighbors called 911. 3 weeks since her entire world had collapsed. And Evelyn Sterling thought 3 weeks was adequate. Mom's right. Miranda chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "Some of us have actual commitments. I have a brand partnership call at 3. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Very well. Let's begin." He opened the folder, pulled out the will, and adjusted his reading glasses. The last will and testament of Adrian Marcus Sterling, executed 18 months ago and duly witnessed. 18 months ago, Selena felt something cold settle in her stomach. That was 6 months before Adrian had told her about his diagnosis, before he'd explained that the same genetic time bomb that had killed his father was ticking in his own chest. Had he known even then? Had he suspected? "I'll skip the legal preamble and get to the distributions," Richard continued. He glanced at Selena, and something in his expression made her sit up straighter. Pity? Warning? She couldn't tell. "To my mother, Evelyn Catherine Sterling, I leave Sterling Mansion and all its contents, along with—" "Finally," Evelyn murmured, satisfaction curling at the corners of her mouth. "Along with a 40% share in Sterling Enterprises and the investment portfolio designated as Trust A, currently valued at approximately $12 million. Miranda's eyes went wide. Even Damien sat up straighter, his attention finally focused. Richard continued, his voice steady. To my sister, Miranda Sterling Vaughn, I leave the Sterling property in Aspen, the art collection currently housed in the Manhattan storage facility, and a 30% share in Sterling Enterprises, along with the investment portfolio designated as Trust B, valued at approximately $9 million. Miranda let out a little squeak of delight. Oh my God! Oh my God! Adrian, you beautiful. She cut herself off, remembering where she was, but the smile stayed plastered across her face. To my brother, Damien Robert Sterling, I leave the fleet of vehicles currently housed at Sterling Mansion, the yacht Poseidon's Pride, and the remaining 30% share in Sterling Enterprises, along with the investment portfolio designated as Trust C, valued at approximately $9 million. Damien punched the air, actually punched it like he just won the lottery. Yes, I knew it. I knew Adrian wouldn't screw me over. Selena felt Lila shifting uncomfortably beside her, confused by the strange energy in the room. She pulled her daughter closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. They hadn't mentioned her yet. They hadn't mentioned Lila. Surely Adrian hadn't. He wouldn't. And finally, Richard said, and his voice dropped half an octave, to my beloved wife, Selena Marie Ward, and our daughter, Lila Rose Sterling. Everyone leaned forward. Even Evelyn's mask of composure cracked slightly, curiosity flickering in her ice-blue eyes. I leave the cottage on the edge of Sterling Hill, with the stipulation that it may not be sold, demolished, or substantially altered for a period of no less than 25 years, or until Lila Sterling reaches the age of 30, whichever comes first. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Miranda laughed. It started as a snicker, then built into full-throated hysteria. The cottage? The cottage? Oh my God, that's perfect. That's actually perfect. What cottage? Damien asked, confused. You mean that shack near the woods? The one that's basically falling apart. That's the one. Miranda gasped between laughs. Oh, Selena, I'm sorry, but that's hilarious. Adrian left you the literal worst piece of property on the entire estate. It doesn't even have working plumbing. Evelyn's smile was thin and sharp as a razor blade. How? Thoughtful of Adrian. I'm sure he had his reasons. Her tone suggested she knew exactly what those reasons were, and that Selena wouldn't like them. Richard's face had gone carefully blank. There is one additional stipulation. The cottage and the land it sits on, approximately 3 acres, are owned outright by Selena and Lila, separate from the Sterling estate. All property taxes have been prepaid for the next 10 years. Big deal, Damien scoffed. It's worth maybe 50 grand. If you could actually find someone dumb enough to buy it, which you can't because of the restriction. Selena couldn't breathe. The cottage. Adrian had left her and Lila a cottage that everyone agreed was worthless, while his family walked away with mansions and millions and his entire business empire. Her vision swam, tears pressing hot against her eyelids, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Is there anything else? Evelyn asked Richard, her tone dismissive. She was already standing, already gathering her Hermes handbag, already moving on with her newly enriched life. No, Mrs. Sterling. That concludes the reading of the will. Excellent. Miranda, Damien, we need to discuss the transition of Sterling Enterprises. Richard, please have all the relevant paperwork sent to my attorney. Evelyn swept toward the door, then paused, turning back to look at Selena with something that might have been pity if it hadn't been quite so cold. Selena, dear, I do hope you understand that the rental house you're currently living in is part of the Sterling Trust properties. We'll need you to vacate within 30 days. The words hit like a physical blow. What? The house on Maple Street. It's trust property. Now that the estate has been settled, we'll be selling it. You understand? Miranda smirked from the doorway. You're welcome to stay at the cottage, of course. I'm sure you'll make it very cozy. They left in a wave of expensive perfume and casual cruelty, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Richard Cole remained seated, his expression troubled. Ms. Ward, don't. Selena's voice came out harder than she'd intended. She stood, scooping Lila into her arms even though her daughter was getting too big to be carried. Just don't. She walked out of that office with her head high and her daughter on her hip, and she didn't let herself break until she was in her car with the doors locked and Lila occupied with her tablet in the back seat. Then she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and let the tears come, silent and bitter and burning. Adrian. God, Adrian, what were you thinking? The cottage was a ruin. She'd seen it exactly once, during a family barbecue at the mansion 2 years ago, when she'd wandered too far from a manicured lawn and stumbled upon it at the edge of the property. Adrian had found her there, staring at the sagging porch and broken windows, and he'd wrapped his arms around her from behind. Creepy, right? He'd murmured against her hair. Sad, she corrected. It looks like it was beautiful once. He'd been quiet for a long moment, then kissed her temple. Maybe it will be again someday. She hadn't understood what he meant then. She didn't understand now. The 30-day eviction notice came exactly 1 week later, delivered by courier because apparently even kicking a widow and her daughter out of their home required a certain level of class. Selena had exactly $2,300 in her bank account. No job. She quit her position as a graphic designer when Lila was born and Adrian had insisted she didn't need to work, and no family of her own to fall back on. Her mother had died when she was 19. Her father had made it clear at her wedding that marrying a rich white man meant she'd chosen their world over his, and she hadn't heard from him since. She spent 3 days calling landlords, only to discover that affordable housing in this part of Connecticut was a contradiction in terms. Everything required first month, last month, and a security deposit she couldn't afford. Several landlords actually laughed when she explained her situation. On the 4th day, she loaded everything she owned into a rented U-Haul truck, strapped Lila into her car seat, and drove to the cottage. The driveway, if you could call it that, was more potholes than pavement, forcing her to slow to a crawl. Branches scraped against the truck's sides, making Lila whimper in the back seat. The woods pressing on both sides, dense and dark even in the middle of the afternoon. Then the trees opened up, and there it was. The cottage looked worse than she remembered. The wood siding had weathered to a gray that matched the overcast sky. Several of the windows were cracked or missing entirely, and the front porch sagged so badly it looked like it might collapse if anyone actually set foot on it. Weeds had overtaken what might have once been a garden, growing waist-high around the foundation. Mama? Lila's voice was small and frightened. We're not really living here, are we? Selena closed her eyes, gathered every ounce of strength she had left, and turned to smile at her daughter. It's going to be an adventure, baby, like camping. I don't like camping. You've never been camping. I still don't like it. Despite everything, Selena laughed. Come on, let's explore our new home. The front door was unlocked, probably because there was nothing inside worth stealing. The interior was even worse than the exterior. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to draw pictures in. The furniture that remained was ancient and mouse-chewed, and there were water stains on the ceiling that suggested the roof leaked in multiple places. The kitchen had a sink, a vintage stove that probably hadn't worked since 1975, and cabinets that hung at drunken angles. But there was electricity. The lights flickered on when she tried the switches, and when she turned the tap in the bathroom, water actually came out rust-colored at first, but eventually running clear. It has good bones, Selena whispered to herself, using the same words her mother used to say about their apartment in the Bronx, before everything fell apart. It just needs some love. She spent the rest of the day unloading the truck, setting up the air mattress she'd bought at Target, and cleaning enough space in one of the bedrooms for Lila to sleep safely. Her daughter helped as much as a 4-year-old could, carrying in her box of stuffed animals and arranging them carefully on the cleanest corner of the floor. That night, they ate peanut butter sandwiches by flashlight, because half the light fixtures didn't work, and Selena told Lila stories about princesses who lived in magical cottages in the woods. Her daughter fell asleep with her head in Selena's lap, and Selena sat there in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sound of the old house settling around her, and tried not to think about how completely her life had unraveled. Her phone buzzed. A text from Miranda. Saw you moving into the cottage. So brave. Let me know if you need anything. followed by an Instagram post tag, hashtag family first, hashtag always here for you showing Miranda at some charity gala, dripping in jewels. Selena turned off her phone. 3 weeks later, she'd settled into a kind of desperate routine. She'd found a part-time job at a local grocery store, stocking shelves during the evening shift while a neighbor's teenage daughter watched Lila. It paid barely enough to cover food and gas, but it was something. She'd patched the worst of the leaks in the roof with a tarp she'd bought at the hardware store, and she'd scrubbed the cottage until her hands were raw and bleeding. But she was drowning in funeral debt. Apparently, dye was expensive, and Adrian's life insurance policy had some kind of clause that delayed payment for 6 months. The Sterling family had paid for the funeral itself, but the medical bills from his final hospital stay were all in Selena's name, and the collection agencies were starting to call. She was carrying a bag of groceries in from the car when Damien's Tesla pulled up the driveway, somehow making even the approach to the cottage look effortless and expensive. He got out wearing designer jeans and a casual button-down that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Selena, thought I'd stop by and see how you're settling in." She set the groceries down on the porch, carefully, because the boards creaked ominously under even that small weight. "I'm fine, Damien. Thanks for checking. The place looks rustic." He glanced around with barely concealed disdain. Very back to nature. Very little house on the prairie. Was there something you needed? "Actually, yes." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then turned it to show her a photograph. "This is the Sterling West Development Project. Luxury condos, high-end retail, waterfront access. It's going to revitalize the entire area." Selena stared at the rendering. It was beautiful in that soulless, modern way, all glass and steel and calculated aesthetic. "That's great, Damien. I'm happy for you. The thing is," he continued, stepping closer, "the project needs adjacent land access to be truly viable. And this cottage, this little 3-acre plot, sits right at the edge of the property line we need." Understanding dawned, cold and heavy. "No, I haven't even made you an offer yet. The will says I can't sell it. The will says you can't sell it for 25 years. But there are ways around that. Legal workarounds. And Selena," he moved closer still, lowering his voice to something that might have been meant to sound friendly. "You're struggling. Anyone can see that. I'm offering you a way out. A way to give Lila a real home, a real future. How much longer can you keep this up?" She wanted to hit him, her hands actually clenched into fists at her sides. "Get off my property." "Selena, now." He held up his hands in mock surrender. Okay. I'm going. But think about it. Think about what's best for Lila. And if you won't sell, at least consider, well, there are other arrangements we could make. Maybe Lila could live with us at the mansion where she'd have." "Get out." He left, but his words lingered like poison in the air. The Sterling family was circling, and Selena knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. That night, after Lila was asleep, Selena sat on the floor of the cottage's main room and let herself admit the truth. She was losing. The cottage was falling apart faster than she could fix it. The debt was mounting. Winter was coming, and she had no idea if the ancient furnace in the basement even worked. Adrian had left her nothing. Nothing except this rotting building, and the hollow promise that everything would be okay. She pressed her face into her hands and tried not to scream. Tomorrow, she'd start looking for a second job. Tomorrow, she'd call about the medical bills and beg for a payment plan. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to fix the crack she found in the foundation wall. Tomorrow, she'd keep fighting. But tonight, in the darkness of the cottage that had become her prison, Selena Ward let herself break. The crack in the foundation haunted Selena's dreams that night. She kept seeing it spreading, spiderwebbing across the entire cottage until walls crumbled and buried her and Lila beneath the rubble. She woke at dawn with her heart racing. Lila's small body curled against her side on the air mattress and forced herself to breathe, one problem at a time. That's what her mother used to say. You can't eat an elephant in one bite, baby girl. The foundation crack was in the southeast corner of the main room, behind where someone had once placed a heavy wooden bookshelf. Selena had moved the bookshelf 3 days ago while cleaning, and that's when she'd seen it. A jagged line running from floor to ceiling, the plaster crumbling away to reveal old wood and stone beneath. She waited until Lila was occupied with her coloring books, then went to examine it more closely in the morning light. The crack was wider than she'd initially thought, and when she pressed her hand against the wall, the plaster felt unstable, shifting slightly under her touch. "Please don't fall down," she whispered to the cottage. "Please just hold together a little longer." She pressed harder, trying to determine how serious the damage was, and a chunk of plaster the size of her palm suddenly gave way, crumbling onto the floor in a cloud of dust. Selena jumped back, coughing, waving her hand to clear the air. When the dust settled, she saw something that made her freeze. Behind the plaster, tucked into a gap between 2 wall studs, was a metal box. Her heart started hammering for an entirely different reason. She glanced back at Lila, who was still absorbed in turning a princess purple, then carefully worked her fingers into the gap. The box was wedged in tight, and she had to pull away more plastic to get it free, but finally it came loose in her hands. It was an old fireproof document box, the kind people used before safe deposit boxes were common. The metal was rusted at the corners, and someone had secured it with a combination lock that had long since corroded. Selena carried it to the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly, and used a screwdriver from her meager tool collection to pry the lock off. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with faded ribbon, the paper yellowed with age. Selena picked up the first bundle and carefully untied the ribbon. The top letter was dated March 15th, 1965, written in elegant cursive on stationery that had once been fine quality. "My dearest Adrian, today you turn 5 years old, and your mother threw you a party that cost more than most families earn in a year. She invited 40 children you barely know, hired a pony, had a cake shaped like a castle, and you, my sweet boy, spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen with me, helping me wash dishes, and asking why the other children didn't want to play hide-and-seek in the garden." Selena's breath caught. This Adrian wasn't her Adrian. The date was wrong. This was Adrian's grandfather, Adrian Sterling Sr., the man the estate had been named after. She kept reading. "Your mother doesn't understand you, darling boy. She wants you to be something you're not, hard and ambitious and cold like your father. But I see the real you. I see the gentle soul who cries when the gardener trims the rose bushes because you think it hurts them. I see the boy who gives his dessert to the kitchen cat. I see the child who will grow into someone extraordinary, if only the world doesn't break him first. I wish I could tell you what you mean to me. I wish I could be more than just Clara the housekeeper, more than the help, but we both know that impossible. Your grandfather and I made our choices long ago, and this is the consequence. I get to love you from a distance, to raise you in the margins of your own home, while your mother barely notices you exist. Just know this. You are loved, Adrian Sterling. You are seen. And no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you will always be my boy. All my love, Clara." Selena's hands were shaking now. Clara Morrison. She'd heard the name before vaguely, in the context of Sterling family history. The longtime housekeeper who'd worked at the mansion for decades. But this letter suggested something far more complicated than a simple employer-employee relationship. She read through more letters, watching Adrian Sr. grow up through Clara's eyes. The letters were filled with love and longing, with pride at his accomplishment and heartbreak at watching Evelyn, even then, apparently cold as ice, push her own son away emotionally while Clara provided the warmth he desperately needed. Then, tucked into the middle of the stack, Selena found a different kind of letter. This one was typed on legal stationery, dated 1968. Agreement of settlement between Jonathan Sterling and Clara Morrison. In exchange for Ms. Morrison's permanent silence regarding the paternity of her son, Jonathan Sterling Jr., Mr. Sterling agrees to the following terms. 1. A one-time payment of $50,000 to lifetime employment at Sterling Mansion 3. Transfer a property deed for the cottage on Sterling Hill 4. Establishment of a trust fund for Jonathan Sterling Jr. to be accessible upon his 25th birthday. Selena read the document 3 times, her mind racing. Clara had a child with Adrian's grandfather, a son named Jonathan, the same name as Adrian Sr.'s father, which meant Clara's son was Adrian Sr.'s half-brother. The family secret wasn't just an affair. It was an entire hidden bloodline, a Sterling by birth who'd been paid off and erased from the official family history. Mama? Lila's voice broke through her shock. I'm hungry. Selena looked up disoriented and realized she'd been sitting at the table for over an hour, the letters spread around her like pieces of a puzzle she was just beginning to understand. Okay, baby, let me make you some breakfast. She made toast and scrambled eggs on the ancient stove, moving on autopilot while her mind spun. The cottage hadn't been a throwaway property. It had been Clara's, a payment for her silence, a piece of Sterling land given to the woman who'd been written out of Sterling history. And Adrian, her Adrian, had known. He must have known. He'd grown up hearing stories about Clara from his father, and when she died, Selena tried to remember. It had been about 5 years ago, shortly before she and Adrian had met. The cottage had been sitting empty ever since. But why had Adrian left it to her? If he knew the history, knew it was connected to a family secret, why had he made it her inheritance instead of selling it or tearing it down or doing anything else that would have actually helped her and Lila survive? She served Lila breakfast and returned to the letters. The later ones were fewer, sadder. Clara writing to Adrian Sr. about watching him marry, have children of his own, become the cold patriarch his father had been. Her disappointment was palpable in every line. The last letter was dated November 2nd, 1989, a month before Adrian Sr. died of the same heart condition that would later kill his son. My darling boy, I know you won't read this. I know you become exactly what I feared, a Sterling through and through, hard and distant and unreachable. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping that somewhere inside the man you became, the gentle child I raised still exists. I'm leaving everything I have to your son, to Adrian. The cottage, the small fortune I managed to save and invest over the years, the truth about who we really are. Perhaps he'll be the one to break the cycle. Perhaps he'll be the Sterling who remembers that love matters more than money. Tell him about me, if you can. Tell him that he comes from love, even if it was a love that had to hide in shadows. Goodbye, my heart. Clara. Selena sat back, tears streaming down her face. Adrian had known. He'd known about Clara, about the hidden fortune she'd mentioned, about all of it. And he'd left her the cottage not as a cruel joke or a worthless inheritance. He'd left it because somewhere in this crumbling building was Clara's legacy, the fortune she'd mentioned, the truth she preserved. The cottage wasn't her prison. It was her salvation. She just had to find it. Selena spent the next 2 days tearing the cottage apart. She started systematically, room by room, pulling up loose floorboards, checking behind every piece of furniture, examining the walls for more hidden compartments. Lila thought it was a game at first, helping her mother search for treasure like pirates, but by the second day, even her daughter's enthusiasm had waned. Mama, can we stop looking now? I want to watch cartoons. Selena sat back on her heels, dust coating her hair and clothes, her fingers raw from prying at stubborn boards. The living room floor was a disaster. She pulled up at least a dozen boards, finding nothing but dirt, mouse droppings, and one very annoyed spider. Yeah, baby, we can stop for today. She made dinner, spaghetti with Jared sauce, the cheapest meal she could manage, and tried not to let her disappointment show. Maybe she'd misunderstood Clara's letter. Maybe fortune had been figurative, not literal. Maybe the old woman had just meant the cottage itself, the property, the connection to Sterling history. Maybe Adrian had genuinely left her nothing but a rotting building and false hope. After Lila fell asleep, Selena returned to the letters, reading them again by lamplight, searching for clues she might have missed. Clara had mentioned investing her savings. She'd mentioned leaving everything to Adrian Sr.'s son, Selena's Adrian. But there were no specifics, no instructions, no map to whatever treasure might or might not exist. She was about to give up for the night when she noticed something odd about one of the envelopes. It was thicker than the others, and when she held it up to the light, she could see there was something inside besides just a letter. Carefully, she opened it and pulled out a small key. Her heart started racing again. The key was old brass, tarnished but still intact, with a number stamped into the head. 237. But a key to what? There were no locks in the cottage that looked like they'd fit this key. All the doors had modern hardware, probably replaced sometime in the last 20 years. She turned the envelope over and found a date written on the back in Clara's elegant handwriting. For Adrian, when you're ready to see the truth. The date was from 2019, just 6 years ago, which meant this letter hadn't been written to Adrian Sr. It had been written to her Adrian, and he'd hidden it here in the cottage, presumably after Clara died. Selena unfolded the letter inside with shaking hands. My dear Adrian, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you finally come to the cottage. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you these things while I was alive. Your father forbade it, and I was too much a coward to defy him directly. But now that I'm with God, his threats can't touch me anymore. You already know the official story. I was a housekeeper who raised your father when Evelyn couldn't be bothered. But the truth is more complicated. Your great-grandfather and I had a relationship that society deemed inappropriate. We had a son together. Your grandfather's half-brother, Jonathan Jr., who was paid off and sent away to start a new life in California. The cottage was part of that payment, my consolation prize for agreeing never to speak the truth. But I was smarter than they gave me credit for. I took that $50,000 settlement and invested it. I was careful, patient, and lucky. Over 50 years, that money grew into something substantial. I bought properties when they were cheap, invested in companies before they became giants, and saved every penny I could. Everything I built for you, not for your father, who became too much like his own father to deserve it, not for Evelyn or your siblings, who have their own fortunes to squander. For you, Adrian, for the gentle boy your father told me about, the one who reminded him of who he used to be before the sterling name hardened him into something cold. The key in this envelope opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank, downtown branch, box 237. Inside, you'll find documents, deeds, and instructions for accessing everything I've left behind. But more importantly, you'll find the final piece of the puzzle, the way into the vault beneath the cottage. Yes, Adrian, there's a vault. Your great-grandfather built it during Prohibition, when he was running liquor and needed somewhere to hide his illegal fortune. It's been empty for decades, but I filled it again. I filled it with your inheritance, with my life's work, with everything you'll need to be free of the Sterling family's poison. The cottage is yours now. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve, not the one they'll try to force on you. With all my love, Clara Morrison. Selena read the letter 3 times, her mind reeling. A vault beneath the cottage. A safe deposit box at First National Bank. An inheritance that Clara had spent 50 years building, all meant for Adrian. Adrian, who had died before he'd claim it. Adrian, who had left the cottage to Selena, knowing what lay beneath it. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely fold the letter back up. This was real. This was actually real. Adrian hadn't abandoned her. He'd given her the key to everything, but he'd hidden it in a way that his family would never find it. They'd been so busy laughing at the worthless cottage that they'd never stopped to wonder why he'd been so specific in the will about it not being sold or demolished. He'd been protecting the vault, protecting Clara's legacy, protecting Selena and Lila's future. She wanted to scream with relief and rage and grief all at once. Adrian, you brilliant, secretive, impossible man. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you make me figure it out alone? But she knew why. If he'd told her, if there had been any hint in his words or actions that the cottage was valuable, the Sterling family would have noticed. Evelyn was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She would have seen through any deception, would have found a way to contest the will, to take whatever Adrian had tried to leave behind. No, he'd had to make it look like an insult, had to make it seem like he'd left Selena nothing so that his family would dismiss it entirely and move on with their mansion and their millions, never realizing they'd been outsmarted. Selena looked around the cottage with new eyes. Somewhere beneath her feet was a vault built during Prohibition, filled with Clara Morrison's life's work. And in a bank downtown was a safe deposit box that would tell her how to access it. Tomorrow, she'd go to the bank. Tomorrow, she'd start claiming what was rightfully hers and Lila's. But tonight, she sat in the dim light of the cottage and whispered to the ghost of her husband, "I see what you did, Adrian. I see it now. And I promise they won't win. Not after everything you sacrificed to protect us." The cottage creaked and settled around her, almost like an answer, and for the first time since Adrian's death, Selena felt something other than despair. She felt hope, and beneath that hope, burning bright and fierce, she felt the first spark of something else. Revenge. First National Bank looked exactly like what it was, an institution built on old money and older secrets. The building was red brick and marble, with columns flanking the entrance and brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine. Selena stood on the sidewalk outside, Lila's hand in hers, and tried to calm her racing heart. She dropped Lila at preschool, a free program she'd found to the county. But the school had called an hour later saying her daughter had a fever. So here they were, both of them, about to walk into a bank and claim an inheritance Selena still wasn't entirely sure existed. "Why are we at the bank, Mama?" Lila asked, her voice nasally from the cold she was fighting. "We're picking up something Daddy left for us," Selena said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. Inside, the bank was hushed and cool, all dark wood and thick carpet that swallowed sound. A receptionist with perfectly styled gray hair looked up from her desk, her professional smile faltering slightly when she took in Selena's thrift store clothes and Lila's runny nose. "May I help you?" Selena straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't feel. "I need to access the safe deposit box. Number 237. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have the key?" Selena placed it on the desk. The brass caught the overhead lights, suddenly looking more substantial than it had in the cottage's dim interior. An identification? She brought everything: driver's license, social security card, marriage certificate, Adrian's death certificate. She'd even brought the copy of the will that Richard Cole had provided, with the cottage inheritance clearly stated. The receptionist examined each document with methodical precision, then made a phone call that involved several hushed conversations and long pauses. Finally, she hung up. "Mr. Patterson will assist you. Please have a seat." Mr. Patterson turned out to be the bank manager, a man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He examined Selena's documents again, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Sterling, I need to ask you a few questions before we proceed." Her stomach clenched. "Of course. Are you here under any duress? Is anyone forcing you to access this box?" "No, what?" "No, of course not. And you're aware of the box's contents?" "Not exactly. My late husband left me some letters that mention it, but I don't know specifically what's inside." Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. "I see. Mrs. Sterling, I was Clara Morrison's banker for over 30 years. When she established this box, she left very specific instructions about who could access it and under what circumstances. Your husband was listed as the primary beneficiary. With his passing, and with the documentation you provided showing you inherited his estate, or at least part of it, you have legal authority to access the box. But I'm obligated to tell you that the contents are substantial. And once you take possession, you'll need to make decisions about security and storage. I'd recommend." "Can I just see it first?" Selena interrupted. "Please." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." They descended into the vault, Lila clinging to Selena's hand and staring wide-eyed at the massive steel door and the walls of safe deposit boxes. Mr. Patterson used his key along with Selena's, and the box slid free with metallic whisper. He carried it to a private viewing room and set it on the table. "I'll give you privacy. Press the button when you're ready to leave." He glanced at Lila, who was starting to lean heavily against Selena's leg. "Would your daughter like a juice box? We keep them for young clients." "That would be wonderful, thank you." Once he left with Lila, who perked up immediately at the promise of juice and cookies, Selena opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were folders, neatly organized and labeled in Clara's precise handwriting. The first was marked property deeds. Selena opened it and felt her breath catch. There were 12 properties. 12. Scattered across Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. Small apartment buildings, a strip mall, 2 commercial lots, a farmhouse with 50 acres. Each deed was in Clara Morrison's name, with instructions to transfer to Adrian Sterling upon her death, and then to his heirs. The second folder was marked investment portfolio. Inside were account statements from a brokerage firm Selena had never heard of, showing holdings in various stocks and bonds. The total value at the bottom of the most recent statement, dated just 6 months ago, made her head spin, $4.7 million. The third folder was labeled bearer bonds. Selena didn't know much about finance, but she knew bearer bonds were valuable, essentially cash in paper form. She counted them carefully. 50 bonds, each worth $50,000, $2.5 million in untraceable, negotiable securities. The fourth folder made her hands start shaking again. It was marked Sterling family documents, and inside were photographs, letters, and what looked like legal documents. She pulled out the first photograph and found herself looking at a young man who could have been Adrian's twin. The back of the photo read, Jonathan Sterling, Jr., 1960. Clara's son, the half-brother who'd been paid off and erased. The documents told a story that would destroy the Sterling family if it ever became public. Proof of the affair, proof of the payoff, proof that Evelyn had known about Jonathan Jr. and had actively worked to keep him hidden because acknowledging his existence would have meant splitting the Sterling fortune. There were even letters from Evelyn to Clara threatening her with deportation. Clara had been British, came to America as a young woman, if she ever spoke about Jonathan Jr.'s paternity. At the bottom of the folder was a sealed envelope marked for Adrian, the vault. Selena opened it with trembling fingers and found a hand-drawn map of the cottage, with detailed instructions for accessing the hidden vault. According to Clara's notes, the entrance was in the basement, behind the old furnace, concealed by a false wall that could be opened by pressing a specific sequence of bricks. Inside the vault was the rest of Clara's legacy. Gold bars she purchased during the 1970s when prices were low, more bearer bonds, cash, and jewelry that had been gifts from Adrian's great-grandfather. Clara estimated the vault's total contents at somewhere around $3 million, possibly more depending on gold prices. Selena sat back in the chair, staring at the folders spread across the table, and tried to comprehend what she was looking at. This wasn't just money. This was generational wealth. This was enough to ensure Lila never wanted for anything, ever. This was freedom from the Sterling family's control, from their mockery, from their threats about taking Lila away. This was power. A knock on the door made her jump. Mr. Patterson's voice came through. Mrs. Sterling? Is everything all right? She gathered the folders, placed them back in the box, and took a deep breath. Yes, everything is fine. I'd like to arrange for a safe deposit box in my name. Please. A large one. When she emerged from the viewing room, Lila was sitting in Mr. Patterson's office, coloring on the back of deposit slips, chocolate cookie crumbs around her mouth. The bank manager looked up at Selena's expression and seemed to understand without being told that her life had just changed. I'll set up the new box immediately, he said quietly. And Mrs. Sterling? Clara was a remarkable woman. She'd be pleased to know her legacy is in good hands. Selena managed a smile. Thank you. But Mr. Patterson, I need you to understand something. No one can know about this. Not yet. The Sterling family. I understand perfectly, he interrupted. Bank privacy laws are very strict. We don't discuss our client's business with anyone. She nodded, relief flooding through her. One more thing. Is there someone here who can help me understand all of this? The properties, the investments? I can recommend several excellent financial advisors. Discreet ones. Thank you. Walking out of the bank with Lila's hand in hers, and Clara's box safely transferred to her own name felt surreal. The sun was too bright, the street too normal. How could the world look exactly the same when everything had just shifted beneath her feet? Her phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Family dinner tomorrow night. 7 p.m. Your presence is expected. Selena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'll be there. It was time for the Sterling family to see exactly what they'd underestimated. The Sterling mansion looked like something out of a magazine, which made sense since it had been featured in Architectural Digest twice. 3 stories of Georgian elegance, manicured lawns that stretched for acres, a circular driveway with a fountain at its center. Selena had always felt like an imposter here, even when Adrian was alive. Tonight, pulling up in her beat-up Honda with Lila drowsed in the back seat, she felt different. She knew what was buried beneath her cottage. She knew what Clara had built. She knew that while the Sterlings had their mansion and their visible wealth, she had something they couldn't touch, couldn't see, couldn't take. It made her feel dangerous. "Do we have to go, Mama?" Lila whined as Selena unbuckled her from the car seat. "Grandma's house is scary." "I know, baby, but we'll eat quickly and leave, okay? I promise." The front door opened before they reached it. Miranda stood in the doorway, wearing a dress that probably cost what Selena made in 3 months at the grocery store. Her smile was practiced and false. "Selena and little Lila, come in, come in. We've missed you." They hadn't. Selena had seen Miranda exactly once since the will reading, and that had been when she'd driven past Cottage and slowed down just enough to take photos for Instagram, captioned with some nonsense about family connections and honoring Adrian's memory. The dining room was everything the cottage wasn't. Crystal chandeliers, silk wallpaper, a table that could seat 20 people easily. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, like a queen presiding over court. Damien was already there, tie loosened, wine glass half empty, even though dinner hadn't been served yet. "Selena," Evelyn said, her tone cool. "How kind of you to join us." And Lila, "Darling, you've grown." Lila pressed closer to Selena's leg. Saying nothing, they took their seats. Selena and Lila were placed at the far end of the table, naturally, and servers began bringing out the first course. Lobster bisque in delicate china bowls. Selena watched Lila try to manage her soup spoon and felt a pang of sadness. Her daughter should have grown up with this kind of grace, this kind of ease. Instead, she was learning to eat peanut butter sandwiches in a cottage that leaked when it rained, but not for much longer. Soon, Selena would have choices. Soon, she'd be able to give Lila everything. "So, Selena," Miranda said brightly, setting down her spoon. "How's the cottage? I drove by last week and it looked rustic." "It's fine," Selena said neutrally. "Must be hard, though," Miranda continued, false sympathy dripping from every word. "Living in such primitive conditions. I mean, does it even have heat? Winter's coming, and I just hate to think of Lila freezing in that place." "We're managing." "Are you, though?" Evelyn's voice cut through the pleasantries like a knife. "Damien tells me you're working at Hanson's grocery store. Stocking shelves in the evenings. That can't pay much." Selena's fingers tightened on her fork. "It pays enough." "Does it?" Evelyn took a sip of wine, her gaze never leaving Selena's face. "Does it pay enough to cover Adrian's medical bills? The funeral expenses we covered on your behalf? The property taxes on the cottage?" The will said the property taxes were prepaid. "For now," Damien interrupted. "But there are other expenses, aren't there? Maintenance, utilities, general upkeep. That place is falling apart. Selena, it's probably not even safe for a child." There it was, the real reason for this dinner. They weren't checking on her out of concern. They were building a case. "The cottage is perfectly safe," Selena said, keeping her voice steady. "Is it?" Evelyn set down her wine glass with precise care. "Because I've been doing some research. Connecticut has very strict laws about child welfare. If a home is deemed unsafe or unsuitable, Child Protective Services can intervene. In the best interest of the child, of course." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Selena felt her heart start to race, but she forced herself to stay calm, to think. They wanted her to panic, to make a mistake, to give them ammunition. "Are you threatening to call CPS on me?" she asked quietly. "Of course not," Miranda said quickly, her eyes wide with fake horror. "We'd never do that. We're family. We're just concerned about Lila's well-being." "So concerned," Damien added, "that we've been discussing options, better options for Lila." Selena pulled her daughter closer. "What kind of options?" Evelyn leaned forward, her expression softening into something that might have passed for grandmotherly concern if her eyes hadn't remained ice cold. Lila could live here at the mansion. She'd have her own room, the best schools, everything she needs. You could visit, of course. We're not monsters, Selena. We just want what's best for Adrian's daughter. No, the word came out harder than Selena intended. Absolutely not. Be reasonable, Evelyn said, her mask slipping slightly. You're barely surviving. You're living in a shack, working a minimum wage job, drowning in debt. What kind of life is that for a child? It's her life, with her mother. For now, Damien said softly. But, Selena, you need to think about the future. What happens when winter comes and you can't afford heating oil? What happens when the roof finally caves in? What happens when... Nothing is going to happen, Selena interrupted. We're fine. You're not fine, Evelyn snapped, her composure finally cracking. You're one emergency away from homelessness, one illness away from losing everything. And frankly, Selena, it reflects poorly on this family to have Adrian's widow and daughter living in such conditions. There it was, the real truth beneath all the fake concern. They weren't worried about Lila. They were worried about their reputation, about what people might say about the powerful Sterling family, letting one of their own live in poverty. If you're so concerned about appearances, Selena said carefully, then help me fix the cottage. Give me a loan to make repairs. Damien laughed. And throw good money after bad? That place isn't worth saving. Selena, it's a teardown. Always has been. Then why did Adrian leave it to me? The question came out before she could stop it. If it's so worthless, why did he specify in his will that it couldn't be sold or demolished? Why did he care so much about a worthless shack? The table went silent. Evelyn and Damien exchanged a look. Quick, but Selena caught it. They'd wondered the same thing. They'd questioned Adrian's motivations. They suspected, but they didn't know. Not yet. Adrian was sentimental, Evelyn finally said. He had fond memories of that cottage from his childhood. Playing there with Clara, I suppose. It was foolish of him to saddle you with it, but Adrian always did have a soft heart. Selena smiled thinly. Then I'll honor his wishes. The cottage stays. Even if it means losing Lila? Miranda's voice was quiet, almost sympathetic. Almost. Selena stood up, pulling Lila with her. We're leaving. Selena, thank you for dinner, Evelyn, but we have to go. She was halfway to the door, Lila's hand clutched in hers, when Damien called out, Think about our offer, Selena. Think about what's best for Lila. Because if you won't do what's right, we'll have to. She didn't respond. She just kept walking, through the mansion's grand foyer, past the crystal and the marble and the oil paintings worth more than most people's houses, out to her beat-up Honda, in the circular driveway. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. Mama? Lila's voice was small and frightened. Are they going to take me away? No, baby. Selena forced herself to breathe, to think, to plan. No one is taking you away from me. I promise. But as she drove back to the cottage through the darkening evening, she knew time was running out. The Sterlings were circling, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. Whether that was the cottage itself or just the satisfaction of destroying her, she wasn't sure. Either way, she needed to move fast. Tonight, she'd go into the basement and find the vault. Tonight, she'd claim what was rightfully hers and Lila's, and then she'd figure out how to protect it from a family that was used to taking whatever they wanted, regardless of who they destroyed in the process. The cottage looked different when she pulled up, no longer a prison, but a fortress. Somewhere beneath its rotting floorboards was her future. She just had to reach it before the Sterlings figured out what she was really sitting on. Selena waited until Lila was deeply asleep, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of childhood exhaustion. Then she grabbed the flashlight, Clara's map, and headed down to the basement. The basement stairs creaked ominously under her weight, and the air grew colder with each step. She hadn't spent much time down here. The space was dark and damp. filled with abandoned furniture and the hulking shape of the old furnace that she still wasn't sure actually worked. Spider webs draped across the ceiling beams like ghostly curtains, and something skittered in the corner when her flashlight beam swept past. According to Clara's map, the entrance to the vault was behind the furnace, accessible through a false wall made of brick. The instructions were specific. Press the third brick from the left on the fifth row, then the seventh brick from the right on the third row, then the center brick on the first row. The sequence would release a hidden mechanism. Selena squeezed behind the furnace, her jacket catching on rust and sharp metal edges. The wall looked solid, just old brick covered in decades of dust and grime. She ran her hand across the surface, counting bricks, and found the first one. She pressed it. Nothing happened. She pressed the second brick in the sequence. Still nothing. Her heart was hammering as she pressed the third brick, wondering if Clara's map was wrong, if the mechanism had rusted shut, if this was all just... A soft click echoed through the basement, and a section of the wall shifted inward about an inch. Selena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She pushed against the wall, and it swung open with surprising ease, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up smelled stale and old, like opening a tomb. Selena steadied herself against the doorframe and shined her flashlight down the stairs. The beam didn't reach the bottom. The staircase went down farther than she'd expected. She thought about Lila sleeping upstairs, about what would happen if she fell, or got trapped, or if the entrance sealed shut behind her. But she also thought about Damien's threats, about Evelyn's cold calculation, about the very real possibility that they'd find a way to take her daughter if she didn't secure her position first. She descended into the darkness. The stairs were stone, worn smooth in the center from decades of use during Prohibition. How many times had Adrian's great-grandfather come down here, hiding illegal liquor, counting his illicit profits? How many secrets had these walls witnessed? At the bottom was a heavy wooden door with an iron handle. Selena pulled it open and stepped into a space that made her gasp. The vault was larger than she'd imagined, maybe 15 feet square, with stone walls and a surprisingly high ceiling. And it was filled with Clara's legacy. Along one wall were stacks of gold bars, arranged neatly on wooden pallets. Selena counted them in the flashlight beam. 20 bars, each stamped with weight and purity. She had no idea what gold was currently worth, but she knew these bars represented serious wealth. On a set of industrial shelves sat dozens of document boxes, each labeled in Clara's precise handwriting. Bearer bonds, Series A, property deeds, commercial jewelry, estate pieces, cash reserves, investment records. In the corner stood an old safe, the kind with a combination dial. Selena pulled out Clara's instructions and found the combination written at the bottom, 15-32-7. She spun the dial with trembling fingers, and the safe opened with a satisfying clunk. Inside were stacks of cash, hundreds and fifties bundled and organized by denomination. There had to be at least $200,000 in there, maybe more. Behind the cash were velvet boxes containing jewelry, diamond necklaces, ruby bracelets, pearl strands, all gifts from Adrian's great-grandfather to Clara, hidden away because they could never be worn in public. Selena sank down onto the cold stone floor, overwhelmed. This was real. All of it was real. Clara Morrison had taken her hush money and turned it into an empire, piece by piece, investment by investment, over the course of 50 years. And she'd hidden it all here, waiting for the right Sterling to claim it. Adrian had known. When he'd inherited the cottage after Clara died, he must have come down here, must have seen all of this, must have understood what it meant. And instead of claiming it for himself, instead of telling his family, he'd kept the secret. He'd waited until he knew his time was running out, and then he'd left it all to Selena in the one way his family couldn't touch, by leaving her the cottage they all considered worthless. Tears streamed down her face. "Adrian," she whispered to the darkness, "you brilliant, impossible man. You really did love us." She spent the next hour documenting everything, taking photos on her phone, making lists, trying to get a sense of exactly what she was dealing with. By her rough calculations, the vault contained somewhere between $8 and $10 million in liquid assets, gold, cash, and bearer bonds. The property deeds and investment documents would need professional assessment, But based on what she'd seen in the safe deposit box, Clara's full estate was probably worth close to $15 million. $15 million that the Sterling family had no idea existed. Selena was sitting on the floor, surrounded by Clara's carefully organized boxes, when she heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Heavy footsteps. Not Lila's light patter, but the tread of an adult moving through the cottage. Her blood turned to ice. She killed the flashlight and sat in absolute darkness, listening. The footsteps moved from room to room, systematically, like someone searching. She heard drawers opening, furniture being moved, the creak of floorboards overhead. Someone was in her house. Someone was looking for something. Lila, terror flooded through her. She had to get upstairs, had to protect her daughter, but if she left the vault open, if whoever was up there found the entrance, the footsteps stopped directly above her. Then she heard a voice, muffled but recognizable. Damien. I'm telling you, there's something here. Adrian wouldn't put that restriction in the will unless the cottage mattered. A pause. I don't care what Mother thinks. I'm going to find whatever he was hiding, and then we're tearing this place down and building the condos. The cottage girl can take her payout and disappear. Another voice responded, but Selena couldn't make out the words. Damien was on his phone, and he wasn't alone in his suspicions. She heard more movement, then the sound of someone descending the basement stairs. Selena moved quickly in the darkness, muscle memory guiding her to the vault door. She slipped through, pulled it shut behind her as quietly as she could, and pressed her back against the stone wall of the staircase. The brick mechanism would lock from this side. Clara's instructions had been clear about that. Once sealed, the wall would look solid again, but she was trapped on the wrong side. Damien was in the basement, and she was here in the dark stairwell, unable to get back to Lila. She heard him moving around, heard him swear when he bumped into something. The beam of his flashlight swept past the furnace, and for a moment she was sure he'd find the entrance, but he moved on, muttering about structural damage and foundation issues. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, she heard him climb back up the basement stairs. Heard him say into his phone, "Nothing down there but junk. But I'm not giving up. I'll come back with an inspector, someone who can tell me if there's anything valuable about this property besides the land." More footsteps. The sound of the front door closing. An engine starting outside. Selena waited in the darkness for another 10 minutes, making sure he was really gone, before she pressed the release mechanism and pushed the door open. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs and emerged into the basement, just as dawn was beginning to lighten the windows upstairs. Lila was still sleeping undisturbed. Selena collapsed on the floor, beside her daughter's makeshift bed, and tried not to sob with relief. Damien had been in their home, searching, and he'd come back, with inspectors, with experts, with whatever tools he needed to unlock the cottage's secrets. Time was running out faster than she'd thought. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust. She needed... Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Sterling, this is Victor Hale. I'm a private investigator, and I have information about your late husband's estate that you need to see. Can we meet?" Selena stared at the message, her instincts screaming warning. But she was out of options. She typed back, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lakeside Coffee." Then she held her daughter close and tried to figure out how to protect everything they'd just inherited from people who had never learned that some things weren't for sale. Victor Hale looked exactly like what he was. A man paid to dig up secrets. Late 40s, sharp eyes that missed nothing, a suit that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. He sat across from Selena at Lakeside Coffee, a manila fold on the table between them, and studied her with the kind of focus that made her skin crawl. "Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Sterling." "It's Mrs. Ward," Selena corrected, her voice cool. "I never legally changed my name." Something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe. "Mrs. Ward, then. I'll get straight to it. I've been hired to investigate irregularities in your late husband's estate." Irregularities? Selena kept her face neutral, even as her heart raced. What kind of irregularities? The kind where a man worth over $30 million leaves his widow essentially nothing. Victor opened the folder and pulled out documents. Adrian Sterling's will doesn't make sense. He gives everything of obvious value to his family, but he puts this strange, ironclad restriction on a worthless cottage. Why? Maybe he was sentimental. Maybe Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Or maybe he was hiding something valuable enough to protect from his own family. Selena took a sip of her coffee, buying time to think. Every instinct told her this man was dangerous, but she needed to know what he knew. Who hired you? I can't disclose my client. Damien Sterling. Victor's pause was all the confirmation she needed. He thinks there's something hidden at the cottage, Selena continued. Something Adrian left behind, and he sent you to find out what. My client's motivations are his own. But Mrs. Ward, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've learned to recognize patterns. Your husband was a smart man. Smart men don't make arbitrary decisions about their estates. That cottage means something. He leaned forward. The question is, do you know what? What would you do if you discovered your late spouse had hidden millions from their own family to protect you? Would you trust a stranger who might be working against you, or keep the secret buried? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you think Selena should do next. Selena met his gaze steadily. If Adrian had wanted me to know something, he would have told me. Would he? Or would he have hidden it so well that even his family couldn't find it? Victor pulled out another document, a blueprint. Selena's blood ran cold when she recognized it. This is the original architectural plan for the cottage, filed in 1925. Notice anything interesting? She looked. The blueprint showed the cottage as it had been built during Prohibition, including a notation in the basement. Storage vault, 15 by 15. There's a vault under your cottage, Victor said quietly. Built during Prohibition for hiding liquor. I'm guessing it hasn't been empty for a long time. I'm guessing Clara Morrison filled it with whatever she accumulated over her lifetime. And I'm guessing Adrian left it all to you. Selena's mind raced. He knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to be dangerous. That's a lot of guessing, she said carefully. Mrs. Ward, I'm going to be honest with you. I was hired to find out what you're hiding so my client can take it from you. But the more I've dug into this case, the more I've realized something. Adrian Sterling outsmarted his entire family. He saw them for what they were: greedy, entitled, cruel, and he made sure his wife and daughter would be protected from them. Victor closed a folder. I don't work for free, Mrs. Ward, but I do have a conscience. So here's what I'm going to tell my client. There's nothing here. The cottage is worthless. The vault was cleaned out years ago. There's no hidden fortune. Why would you do that? Because Damien Sterling is the kind of man who'd take a child from her mother just to get access to property. And because Clara Morrison spent 50 years building something remarkable, and I'll be damned if I help destroy it. He stood, straightening his jacket. But Mrs. Ward, you need to move fast. Damien's not going to take my report at face value. He'll hire someone else, someone with fewer scruples. You have maybe 2 weeks before this whole thing blows up in your face. What am I supposed to do? Secure the assets, get them out of the cottage, and into accounts the Sterlings can't touch. And most importantly, he looked at her seriously. Stop living like you're powerless. You're not the cottage girl anymore. You're a woman with 15 million reasons to fight back. He left cash on the table for his coffee and walked out, leaving Selena sitting in stunned silence. Victor Hale had just given her a gift, time. But he was right. 2 weeks wasn't much. She needed to move the gold, secure the bearer bonds, transfer the property deeds into trust that protected Lila's inheritance. She needed lawyers, accountants, financial advisors she could trust. She needed to stop hiding and start fighting. Her phone rang. Richard Cole, the family attorney. Mrs. Ward, I need to inform you that Evelyn Sterling has filed a petition with family court. She's seeking emergency custody of Lila, claiming the cottage constitutes an unsafe living environment. The world tilted. She can't do that. She can try. The hearing is scheduled for next week. I'd strongly suggest you retain your own attorney. Selena hung up and sat there, her coffee growing cold, her daughter at preschool, her entire world balanced on a knife's edge. The Sterlings had made their move. Now it was time to make hers. Selena spent the next 3 days moving like a woman possessed. She hired Marcus Chun, a family law attorney whose reputation for destroying wealthy opponents in court preceded him. She contacted the financial advisor Mr. Patterson recommended, a woman named Janet Reeves who specialized in complex estate situations, which apparently was code for hidden fortunes that need to stay hidden. And she began, piece by piece, moving Clara's legacy out of the vault. The gold bars went first. Jan arranged for a secure transport service, bonded, insured, completely discreet, to move them to a vault at a private storage facility an hour away. 18 gold bars, each weighing about 27 pounds, worth approximately $1.8 million at current market prices. The bearer bonds were trickier. Janet explained that while they were essentially cash, depositing them required careful handling to avoid triggering money laundering investigations. They set up a series of trusts, one for Lila's education, one for long-term investments, one for immediate living expenses, and began the process of converting the bonds into legitimate, traceable assets. The property deeds were already in the process of being transferred into Selena's name, with additional trusts established to protect them from any claims the Sterling family might make. By the end of the third day, Selena had secured approximately $12 million in assets that the Sterlings would never touch. The remaining cash and jewelry stayed in the vault for now, along with the document about the Sterling family secrets, her insurance policy, if she needed it. Marcus Chen called on Thursday evening. The custody hearing is Monday at 9 a.m. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. No relation to Clara, I checked. Evelyn has retained Bradford and Sons. They're expensive and they're good, but they're not prepared for what we're going to show them, which is bank statements showing you have substantial assets, contracts with licensed contractors to renovate the cottage, documentation that Lila is enrolled in an excellent preschool program, has regular pediatric care, and is thriving. Character witnesses. I've already spoken to Lila's teacher, your neighbor, and the director at preschool. They all paint a picture of a devoted mother doing everything right. Will it be enough? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Selena, I'm going to be honest. Judges are unpredictable when it comes to custody cases involving wealthy families. The Sterlings have power, connections, and the kind of lawyers who know how to weaponize the system. But here's what they don't have: the truth. And the truth is that you're a good mother who's been backed into a corner by people who see your daughter as property, not a person. So we have a chance. We have better than a chance. But Selena, you need to be prepared for them to fight dirty. They're going to bring up every mistake you've ever made, every struggle, every moment of weakness. They're going to try to paint you as unstable, incompetent, unfit. Can you handle that? Selena thought about the vault beneath her feet, about Clara's letters, about Adrian's final gift. She thought about everything she'd survived in the past 2 months, the grief, the poverty, the humiliation. I can handle it, she said. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Selena dressed carefully in the one good suit she owned, did her makeup to hide the circles under her eyes from 3 nights of minimal sleep, and dropped Lila off at her neighbor's house. She couldn't bring her daughter to this. Couldn't let Lila see her mother and grandmother fight over her like she was a prize to be won. The courthouse was downtown, all marble and justice, and the weight of systems designed to crush people who didn't have money. Selena met Marcus on the steps, and together they walked into the building. The hearing room was smaller than she'd expected. Judge Morrison sat behind an elevated bench, a black woman in her 50s with an expression that gave nothing away. Evelyn was already seated with her legal team. 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than Selena's car, all holding leather portfolios and radiating expensive confidence. Miranda was there too, dressed like she was attending a charity luncheon, her phone face down on the table in front of her. Damien sat beside his mother, his expression smug. They thought they'd already won. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. This is a petition for emergency custody filed by Evelyn Sterling regarding her granddaughter, Lila Rose Sterling. Mrs. Sterling, your counsel may proceed. The lead attorney for Bradford and Son stood, a man named William Bradford III, silver-haired and smooth-voiced. Your Honor, my client seeks custody of her granddaughter due to concerns about the child's current living conditions. Mrs. Ward, the child's mother, is residing in a structure that lacks adequate heating, has significant structural damage, and is located in an isolated area with no nearby emergency services. He presented photographs of the cottage, exterior shots that emphasize appealing paint, the sagging porch, the overgrown yard. He presented a report from an independent inspector that Damien had clearly paid for, claiming the cottage was unsuitable for habitation. Furthermore, Bradford continued, Mrs. Ward is employed part-time at a grocery store, earning barely above minimum wage. She has substantial debt, including medical bills exceeding $40,000. She is, by any objective measure, unable to provide for her daughter's needs. In contrast, Mrs. Evelyn Sterling can offer the child a stable home, excellent educational opportunities, and the kind of security every child deserves. He sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Morrison turned to Marcus. Counsel for Mrs. Ward? Marcus stood, and his smile was sharp. Your Honor, the petitioners have painted a picture of poverty and instability. What they haven't mentioned is that Mrs. Ward has recently come into a substantial inheritance from Clara Morrison, her late husband's caretaker. Mrs. Ward is not impoverished. She is, in fact, a woman of considerable means who has chosen to honor her late husband's wishes by maintaining the cottage while making substantial improvements. He presented his own documents, the bank statements Janet had helped prepare, showing accounts with healthy balances, the contract with contractors, dated and signed, photographs of the cottage's interior, clean and organized, showing a modest but safe home. Mrs. Ward's daughter is thriving, Your Honor. Lila is enrolled in a highly rated preschool program where teachers report she is happy, healthy, and well-adjusted. She has regular medical care, proper nutrition, and most importantly, a mother who loves her and is fighting every day to build a life for them both. Marcus paused, then delivered his final blow. What this case is really about, Your Honor, isn't Lila's welfare. It's about a wealthy family that can't accept losing control. Adrian Sterling left his wife and daughter a property they consider worthless, and rather than respect his wishes, they're trying to use the family court system to take that property and the child by force. Bradford shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is making inflammatory accusations that I can support with evidence. Marcus interrupted smoothly. He presented text messages, Miranda's fake concern, Damien's threats about the cottage, Evelyn's suggestions that Selena give up her daughter for her own good. Judge Morrison read through the messages, her expression darkening. Mrs. Sterling, she said, looking at Evelyn, did you or your son suggest to Mrs. Ward that she voluntarily surrender custody of her daughter? Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. We suggested what was best for the child. That's not what I asked. Did you suggest Mrs. Ward surrender custody? We offered to help. Yes or no, Mrs. Sterling? Evelyn's jaw tightened. Yes, but only because... That's enough. Judge Morrison set the messages aside. Mr. Bradford, does your client have any evidence of actual abuse, neglect, or immediate danger to the child? Bradford shuffled papers. The living conditions are being addressed, according to the contracts Mr. Chun has provided. Anything else? Silence. Judge Morrison removed her glasses. I've been on the bench for 17 years, and I've seen a lot of custody cases. Most involve genuine concerns about a child's welfare. This is not one of those cases. This is a wealthy family trying to bully a grieving widow, and I will not allow my courtroom to be used for that purpose. Evelyn went pale. Damien's smug expression vanished. The petition for emergency custody is denied, Judge Morrison continued. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting any member of the Sterling family from contacting Mrs. Ward or appearing at her residence without explicit written permission. If you have concerns about your granddaughter's welfare, Mrs. Sterling, you may petition for supervised visitation through the proper channels. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder. Selena sat frozen, barely able to process what had just happened. They'd won. The judge had seen to the Sterling's manipulation, had protected Lila, had given Selena the legal shield she desperately needed. Marcus leaned over, his voice low. Don't celebrate yet. This was just the first round. They'll appeal, they'll try other tactics. But for now, you and Lila are safe. Across the courtroom, Evelyn was gathering her things with stiff, furious movements. Miranda looked shocked, her phone abandoned on the table. And Damien was staring at Selena with an expression of pure hatred. She met his gaze and didn't look away. Let him hate her. Let them all hate her. She just won the first battle in a war she hadn't chosen, but was fully prepared to fight. 3 months later, the cottage looked like a different place. The roof had been replaced, the windows fitted with new glass, the porch rebuilt with strong timber that didn't creak or sag. Inside, the walls had been replastered and painted a warm cream color that caught the afternoon light. The kitchen had new appliances. The bathroom had been completely renovated, and the bedrooms were cozy and safe. It wasn't a mansion. It would never be Sterling Manor, with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. But it was home, and it was theirs, and Selena had never loved a place more. Lila was in her room, her actual room, with a real bed and bookshelves and a window seat where she could read, playing with her dolls. Through the open door, Selena could hear her daughter narrating an elaborate story about a princess who lived in a magical cottage in the woods. Some things, it seemed, came full circle. Selena stood in the living room, looking at the spot where the crack in the wall had been, the crack that had led her to Clara's letters, to the vault, to everything. The wall was smooth now, perfectly repaired, giving no hint of the secrets it had once held. The vault was empty. Everything had been moved, secured, invested, protected. The gold was in a private storage facility. The bare bonds had been converted into legitimate trusts. The property deeds were in Selena's name, generating income from tenants she'd never met. The document about the Sterling family's secrets were in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Insurance she hoped she'd never have to use. Clara Morrison's 50 years of careful planning had given Selena and Lila a foundation that couldn't be shaken. They had security. They had options. They had power. Her phone rang. Janet Reeves, her financial advisor. "Selena, I have the final numbers on this state evaluation. Are you sitting down? Should I be?" The total value, including the property's investments, remaining bearer bonds, and gold, comes to just over $17 million. After taxes and legal fees, you're looking at approximately $14 million in liquid assets, plus the ongoing income from the rental properties. $14 million. Selena let the number wash over her. It was more than she'd imagined, more than she'd dreamed possible that day she'd sat in Richard Cole's office and been told she was inheriting a worthless cottage. "Selena, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Janet, for everything. You did the hard part. I just helped you organize it." Janet paused. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" Selena had thought about little else. She'd spent 3 months securing what Adrian had left her. 3 months fighting off the Sterling family's attempt to undermine her. 3 months just surviving. Now it was time to do more than survive. "I want to start a foundation," she said, "in Clara Morrison's name, for single mothers who are struggling, who need help getting back on their feet, housing assistance, job training, legal support. Everything I didn't have when Adrian died. That's a beautiful idea. And Janet, I want to buy Sterling Enterprises." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. "You want to what?" "Damien's been running the company into the ground. I've been watching the stock prices. They've dropped 18% since he took over. The company is vulnerable, and I want to buy a controlling share." "Selena, that's aggressive. That's declaring war." "They declared war first," Selena said quietly, "when they tried to take my daughter. When they humiliated me in that lawyer's office. When they called me the cottage girl and laughed while I picked up the pieces of my life. I'm not looking for revenge, Janet. I'm looking for justice. Justice and revenge can look pretty similar sometimes. Maybe, but here's the thing. I'll run Sterling Enterprises better than Damien ever could. I'll treat the employees fairly. I'll make sound business decisions. And I'll rebuild what Adrian's father built before Evelyn and her children started tearing it apart. It's not just about hurting them. It's about honoring what Adrian wanted, a Sterling legacy that actually means something." Janet laughed, a sound of pure delight. Okay, let's do it. I'll start putting together a team. This is going to take time, and it won't be cheap, but Selena, it's going to be spectacular. After she hung up, Selena walked outside to the small garden she'd started planting. Spring was coming, and the first green shoots were pushing through the soil. She'd planted roses, Clara's favorite, according to letters, and herbs and vegetables, things that would grow and flourish and provide. A car pulled up the driveway. For a moment, Selena tensed, old habits from the months of looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next Sterling attack. But it was just Richard Cole, the family attorney, in his sensible sedan. He got out carrying a briefcase, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Ward, I hope I'm not intruding. Mr. Cole, what can I do for you? I came to deliver something. He opened his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. I was instructed to give this to you 6 months after Adrian's death. I'm a few weeks early, but given everything that's happened, I thought you should have it now. Selena took the envelope with shaking hands. It was addressed to her in Adrian's handwriting. He knew, Richard said softly, about the vault, about Clara's legacy, about all of it. He came to see me a year before he died and made me promise to give you this letter at the right time. He said you'd understand when you read it. Thank you. Richard nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Mrs. Ward? Adrian was my friend, not just my client. And I want you to know he loved you more than anything. Everything he did to protect you, and Lila, I hope you know that. I do now. After Richard left, Selena sat on her new porch swing, the one the contractors had installed last week, and opened the letter. My darling Selena, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found Clara's vault. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about it while I was alive. I'm sorry for all the secrets, all the misdirection, all the pain I knew my death would cause you. But I couldn't risk my family finding out. Mother would have contested the will. Damien would have hired lawyers. Miranda would have posted about it on Instagram until the whole world knew. They would have found a way to take it from you, because that's what Sterlings do. They take. Clara spent 50 years building that fortune for me, and I spent the last 5 years of my life making sure it would go to you and Lila. The cottage, the vault, the bearer bonds, the properties. It's all yours. Not because you married me, but because you loved me when I was dying, because you gave me Lila, because you deserve security and peace and freedom from my family's poison. They're going to fight you. They're going to try to take Lila, to claim the cottage, to destroy everything I built for you. Don't let them. You're stronger than you know. Selena, you're smarter than they give you credit for. And you have something they'll never understand. You have love, real love, the kind that builds instead of destroys. Use what Clara left. Use it to build a life for you and Lila. Use it to break free from the Sterling name and everything it represents. And if you want to, if you feel like it, use it to show them exactly what they lost when they underestimated the woman they called the cottage girl. I love you, Selena. I loved you from the moment we met, and I'll love you beyond death. Take care of our daughter. Tell her about me. Tell her that her father's last act was one of love, not abandonment. You were never nothing. Selena, you were always everything. Forever yours, Adrian. Selena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket, close to her heart. Mama? Lila appeared in the doorway, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. Why are you crying? Selena wiped her eyes and smiled. Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? We can have whatever you want. As they walked inside together, Selena looked back at the cottage one more time. It had been a prison, then a mystery, then a fortress. Now it was simply home, the place where everything had changed, where a woman they dismissed had found her power, where love had defeated greed. The Sterling family would learn eventually that she bought controlling interest in their company. They'd learn that the cottage girl they'd mocked now owned their legacy. They'd learn that Adrian Sterling had outplayed them all from beyond the grave. But that would come later. For now, Selena Ward had everything she needed. Her daughter safe and happy, a home that was truly theirs, and the knowledge that beneath the cottage's floorboards, where millions had once hidden in darkness, there was now only empty space. because the real treasure had never been the gold or the bonds or the properties. It had been the chance to begin again. And this time, she was writing her own story.
Wow, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this video, the biggest way you can show me love and encourage me to keep creating is to hit that like button and subscribe. Takes 1 second, but it makes a huge difference.